This is Greg Fowler for Online London, and with me is Linda Freeman, a candidate in Ward 3. Welcome.
Thank you.
If elected, how many hours per week on average do you expect that you would spend working in your elected capacity?
I am employed as a letter carrier full-time, but I do have early days that I can spend time going to afternoon meetings, attending events, and I plan to spend between 20 and 25 hours a week on this particular position. I was on the school board and I also spent about 20 hours a week.
Do you think ward councillors are currently paid enough for the amount of work that they'll do during the next term of City Council?
I think they are if they're not considered full-time. If they're considered full-time, it's not enough money to pay them. But it's very adequate, and I think it's very fair to have for part-time work.
London's governance model is currently undergoing significant change, and of course that includes the elimination of Board of Control. Do you think that this will increase the necessity for ward councillors to inform themselves about issues outside of their own ward boundaries?
Absolutely. With the loss of 4 votes on City Council, everybody is going to be looking at the whole city, making citywide decisions, especially at the budget. And I think it's important, first of all, for contingency work to work in the ward with the people and with the different neighborhood groups. But it's also very important for every councillor to look at the downtown area, because that's the heart of the city.
Do you live within the geographical boundaries of the electoral area in which you are contesting this election?
No, I do not. I used to live in Ward 3 when I ran for the school board, and I continued to stay in Ward 3 while I was on the school board, but then I moved away.
How many of your post-teenage years have you lived in London?
Oh, I've lived here all my life.
Have you attended any standing committee meetings over the course of the last 4 years?
No, I have not, but I listen to talk radio every day, read the paper, and go online to check to see what's happening with City Council.
Have you attended any Board of Control meetings over the last 4 years?
No, I haven't, but I have attended some neighborhood meetings concerning some green space that we were worried about having it rezoned, and I've been active in my own local community.
Are you familiar with the Municipal Act and the Municipal Councillor's Guide?
I've read it. It's been a while because I did run unsuccessfully for the City Hall 10 years ago, and I read it at that point, but I have not reacquainted myself with it.
Strengthening neighborhoods, the task force recommended development of a neighborhood matching fund type program for large and small community projects other than celebrations or events. Do you support that recommendation? Well,
I've put together 2 neighborhood watches, 2 separate areas, and 2 neighborhood watches, and I continue to coordinate them today. I think whenever there's a chance to have some funding go into a particular project, and not talking about celebrations and having hot dog barbecues, but I'm talking about specific projects. For example, a library might need some more books. I shouldn't talk about schools because that is funded in a different way. But I think if there's something that's earmarked particularly for a particular community, then I think I would fight to get that money.
And what maximum per project amount do you think that the city should contribute?
Well, I think it would depend on what kind of project it is and how many people it affects. I would say that there would probably have to be a maximum of $5,000, but I think that could easily be matched by businesses within that particular neighborhood or wider community.
Do you support the development of a community program to fund the creation of public art in public places?
Well, we've got the Arts Project on Dundas Street, just down the street here. I think it's a good idea. I've seen students working on, not graffiti, but wall drawings. I think the downtown actually has really benefited from a number of artworks. I know that they have a program in the summer where they design pictures and drawings on the sidewalk with sidewalk chalk in front of the market, and I think anything to bring the arts to the people as opposed to the other way around is a good idea.
Should the City of London and its boards and commissions embrace the concept of making their data open and accessible to everyone as often as is possible, and adopting open standards for that data?
I think it's good to have transparency as long as there's no personnel issues involved or negotiations involved. I think it's very important, especially, for example, the LTC labor strike that we had for 2 months last year. I think it might be important that people have a chance to look at some of the budget and to see where the expenses are going.
When existing software applications have to be replaced or when software licenses have to be renewed, should the city adopt the use of open source software whenever that's possible?
Absolutely, I believe in full tendering.
Is the city's communication department being given enough resources and money and personnel to properly maintain the city website and to inform citizens in a timely fashion?
Seems like a good website. I've used it a number of times. I think it's fairly easy to navigate around it. I don't really know how much the budget is, so I really couldn't comment further.
Should citizens be able to subscribe to subject-specific RSS feeds from City Hall in order to stay informed?
They could, as long as it's not too expensive to run that program.
Should citizens be able to download the agendas of upcoming public meetings, including advisory committee meetings, at least a week in advance?
I don't see why not. They would be downloading it to their computers. I don't see any kind of extra expense involved with that. It's public information.
Despite the requirement of the Municipal Act that all City Hall meetings be public except for specific reasons, it's been argued that they most often are not because of the inability of the public to hear what's being said. Do you support the adoption of a policy which mandates the use of microphones in all public meetings at City Hall?
Well, that's a good question. I think they have been retrofitting the council chambers so that people can hear. I know that if there's a really hot issue and a lot of people are crowding into a room and whispering amongst themselves, it's kind of hard to hear. I think most of the councillors speak very well and speak clearly, so that you shouldn't really need microphones every single time you have a public meeting. But if you could afford it, I would support that.
Do you think that the City of London ought to be webcasting all of its public meetings?
Yes, absolutely. They televise them now, and a number of people watch them and tune in. I think a webcast, especially with so many young people using computers and the social media to get their information, I think that's how we reach the young voters.
Should the city's boards and commissions be webcasting all of their public meetings?
That would be a good idea as well. Maybe they'd have more response. For example, the meeting held just the other day to talk about councillors' salaries. They had 2 people from the public give submissions, so I think more people could give feedback online.
Should the chairpersons of public meetings at City Hall have to announce motions and amendments to motions and the number of votes for and against those motions so that the public can understand what's taking place?
I think so, especially when you have a lot of sometimes there are amendments to the motions, and a lot of times people in the gallery, especially if they can't hear too well, they miss some of the information and they don't realize what city councillors are voting on. So to make it very clear, I think a yes and no, and to read the motion would be a fair thing to do.
Should London hire an Auditor General?
Yes.
Should homeowners have to pay a percentage of the cost for the repair of damage to underground infrastructure on their own property that has been caused by city-owned trees?
Oh, that's a good question, because trees, the roots travel all over and clog up some sewers. I know that when new sewers are put into a number of streets, friends of ours just had some new sewers on their streets put in, but they did have to pay a certain cost to get it into their home. So I don't know if I could comment on that. I don't know what the costs are. I would imagine the city should pick it up, just like if they damage the grass in front of, during the sidewalk plowing in the wintertime, the grass is all churned up along the side, but city owners or residents are expected to repair that themselves.
Do you agree with the placemaking concept of neighborhood gateways?
I don't understand that question.
Should there be increased user representation on the London Transit Commission?
Increased user representation. Yes, because you need the feedback from the people who use the system.
If the City of London is going to provide venture capital to businesses, Should the city be guaranteed a return on its investment in the event that those businesses become profitable?
It'd be nice to see them become profitable, because the city is basically a venture capital project, is investment project. So you have the John Labatt Center that the city invested a lot of money, taxpayers' dollars, and they're slowly starting to see the proceeds from that coming back to them. Whereas if you have the research center at the university, the city has had to bail them out because they have not turned a profit yet. But I would hope that they would expect a profit, maybe not in the next few years, but hopefully. But that's a risk because it's an investment.
I'm sorry to say that we're out of time, but I will skip to the very last one on my list.
Okay.
Do you think that people ought to be able to raise chickens in their backyards?
No. I think if they'd like to live outside of the city limits, or if they have, I'll say no for across the board. However, I think there are exemptions. I think if you live in a property on Dundas Street East where you're so far out and there you have no neighbors around, but you're still considered in the city limits, I think there's probably an exemption that you could take up with City Hall.
That concludes the interview. Thank you for your cooperation.
Thank you, Greg, for the opportunity.